They say family is where we find our greatest comfort. But what happens when the ones we love the most turn their backs on us? What if the people we trust the most betray us in the worst possible way? My name is Amara. I am 22 years old. I live with my father, my stepmother, and her son, Timur. We live in a small but peaceful house in the city. It has 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and a little garden outside. The walls are painted light blue. I have always liked that color. It feels like the sky, calm and endless. Every morning, I wake up before the sun. I sit on the edge of my bed and breathe. Sometimes I hear the birds. Sometimes I hear nothing at all. That is when I feel most myself. My room is simple. There is a desk near the window, a small bookshelf, and a mirror that has a tiny crack on one side. I never tried to fix it. It reminds me that things can still be useful, even when they are not perfect. After I wake up, I make my bed. Then I go to the kitchen. I boil water for tea and toast some bread. My father likes cardamom in his tea. My stepmother prefers green tea with no sugar. I always remember who likes what. I carry their cups to the table. I place everything gently. Then I sit and eat quietly. Most mornings, nobody talks much. My father reads the newspaper. My stepmother checks her phone. Timur plays games on his tablet. I do not mind the silence. In fact, I feel comfortable in it. It is the silence I have known for years. My father works as a clerk at the railway office. He leaves home by 8. He walks slowly, always carrying his brown leather bag. He has used the same bag for over 15 years. He believes in keeping things for a long time. After he leaves, I usually clean the house. I sweep the floors, wipe the table, water the plants. My stepmother rarely helps. She says she has other things to do. I never ask what those things are. Timur is younger than me by 6 years. He is quiet, but not unkind. He does not speak much to me. I do not blame him. He is not my brother. He is her son. Still, we share the same house. We breathe the same air. Sometimes I wonder what he thinks of me, but I never ask. At 11, I go to the community center to teach English. It is a small job, and the pay is not much, but I enjoy it. The students are young children. They come from different neighborhoods. They laugh easily, ask funny questions, and sometimes hug me without warning. When I teach them, I forget everything else. I forget the silence at home. I forget the heavy eyes of my stepmother. I forget the way I always feel like a guest in my own house. The community center is like a second home to me. The walls are painted yellow and green. There are books stacked on the shelves and drawings taped to the walls. My students call me Miss Amara. When they say my name, it feels like I matter. After class, I return home by 2. I usually eat lunch alone. My stepmother eats earlier. She does not like to wait. In the afternoons, I read or write in my notebook. I write everything I feel. I do not always understand my feelings, but writing helps. My notebook is brown with a ribbon tied around it. I keep it under my pillow. Sometimes I write dreams. Not the kind I have at night, but the kind I hold quietly in my heart. Like having my own place one day, or seeing the sea, or walking into a room and knowing I belong. At 5, my father returns. I bring him water and ask about his day. He always says, "It was fine." Then he nods and sits down. Dinner is simple. Rice and lentils. Sometimes chicken if my stepmother is in a good mood. We all eat together, but we do not really speak. We are like people in a waiting room. Close, but distant. At night, I sit by the window and look at the stars. There is one star that shines brighter than the rest. I like to believe it watches over me. I whisper to it sometimes. I say things like, "Please do not let me disappear," or, "Please help me find my place." I do not know if the star listens, but it feels good to speak. Then I go to bed. I pull the blanket over me and close my eyes. Sometimes I sleep quickly. Other times I stare at the ceiling and wait for morning. That was my life. Simple, predictable, quiet. I did not expect anything to change. I did not think change was even possible. But change does not knock before it enters. It just walks in and sits down, sometimes quietly, sometimes like a storm. And I was about to learn that everything I knew was only the beginning. It started with little things. Not loud things, not big things. Just strange things. One evening, I came home from the community center and saw my stepmother standing in my room. She was holding my notebook. The brown one. The one with the ribbon. My heart stopped for a second. She looked at me. She did not smile. She said, "What is this?" I walked in slowly. My voice felt thin. "It is just my writing." She opened a page. Her eyes moved quickly over the words. "You write too much," she said. "You should find better things to do." She dropped the notebook on my bed and walked out. I picked it up and held it close to my chest. I wanted to cry, but I did not. I just sat there in the quiet, feeling like my skin did not fit me. That night, I placed the notebook in a new hiding place, behind the old books in the bottom drawer of my shelf. I whispered to it like it was a child. "I will keep you safe." The next morning, the water in the kitchen was cold. There was no gas. The stove would not light. My stepmother said, "Did you forget to fill the cylinder?" I had not. I always remembered things like that. I told her, "It was full yesterday." She frowned and said nothing more. Later, I found the gas pipe unplugged. Just enough to stop the flow. Not broken. Just pulled a little. I plugged it back in. I said nothing. A week passed. Then another strange thing happened. I left my earrings on the side table. Little silver ones. A gift from my mother. The only thing I had from her. When I returned from class, they were gone. I looked everywhere. Under the bed. In drawers. Even inside shoes. I asked Timur, "Did you see my earrings?" He shook his head. "No, I did not touch them." He looked honest, but tired. That night, I asked my stepmother. She looked straight into my eyes. She said, "You are always careless. If you lose things, do not blame others." I did not say anything, but inside, I could feel something twisting, a quiet fear, like something invisible was standing just behind me. On a Tuesday afternoon, I came home early. The center was closed because the electricity was out. As I walked in, I heard whispering from the living room. It was my father and my stepmother. Their voices were low. I stopped near the doorway, just behind the curtain. "She is not a child anymore," my stepmother said. "You need to decide." "She is my daughter," my father replied. His voice sounded tired. "She is not my daughter," she said. "And I do not want her in this house forever." There was silence. Then my father said something I never thought he would say. "She has no other place to go." My stepmother replied, "Then find her one." My feet felt heavy. My breath got stuck in my throat. I walked away quietly. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the floor. My hands were shaking. That night, I could not eat. Even the rice tasted like salt water. Something was changing in the house. Walls that once felt soft now felt like stone. Rooms that used to hold silence now held tension. Eyes that once looked at me gently now looked right through me. Even my father. He had always been quiet, yes, but now he seemed distant, like his thoughts were somewhere far away. One evening I asked him, "Baba, are you okay?" He looked at me. He smiled, but his smile was not real. It was tired and weak. I'm fine, Amara," he said. "Do not worry." But I did worry, because I could feel something in the air. Something was coming. Something was moving silently, like a shadow under the door. One night I found a paper on the kitchen table. It was folded twice. I opened it. It was a bank receipt. A large amount of money had been taken out from my father's account. I stared at the paper. I felt like I was reading something I was not supposed to see. When I asked my father the next day, he said it was for some repairs at the office. But his eyes did not meet mine, and I remembered. His office building had been fully renovated last year. Then came the message. It was a Sunday. I was reading by the window when Timur came to me, holding his phone. He looked confused, a little scared. He showed me the screen, a message from an unknown number, but the name on top said Amara. It was my name, but I had never seen this number before. The message said, "I know your secret. You should leave before it comes out." I felt cold, like someone had poured ice water into my bones. I asked Timur, "Did you send this to yourself?" He looked hurt. "No, I just opened my phone and it was there." I stared at the screen. I whispered, "Someone is playing a game," but deep inside, I was not sure it was a game. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I felt something heavy sitting on my chest. Not real. Not a thing. Just a feeling. Like the air around me had changed. Like the house I had always known was becoming a stranger. I held my notebook and whispered, "Something is wrong. I do not know what it is. But something feels strange. I didn't mean to find it. I wasn't looking for it. But sometimes the truth finds you, even when you're not ready." It happened on a Thursday. I came home early again. The teacher at the center was sick, so class was canceled. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I thought no one was home. But as I passed by the guest room, I heard something. The soft sound of paper being folded. I stopped. The door was half open. Inside, my stepmother stood at the table, her back to She didn't hear me. On the table were stacks of papers. Some old, some new, and money, lots of it, in neat bundles, tied with rubber bands. I had never seen so much cash in my life. My heart started beating faster. I took a step back, quietly. But just then, she turned. Her eyes met mine. For a second, we both froze. Then she said sharply, "What are you doing here?" I came home early, I said. My voice was shaky. She walked over quickly and closed the door. Right in my face. I stood there, staring at the wood. My hands were cold. My head was full of questions. Where did that money come from? Why was she hiding it? And why? Why did I feel like it had something to do with me? Later that evening, I sat on the roof. It was dark. The stars were out, but I wasn't looking at them. I was thinking, trying to put the pieces together. The cold water, the missing earrings, the gas leak, the whispering in the living room, the message on Timur's phone, the money. It didn't make sense, not all of it, but something was clear now. This wasn't just about someone disliking me. This was about removing me. The next day, I asked Timur a question I hadn't asked before. "Do you think they want me to leave?" He looked down at his hands. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But something feels off. I hear them talking sometimes." "About me?" He nodded once, then added, "I think they're hiding something." I looked at him. His eyes were sad. He looked like a boy who wanted to help, but didn't know how. I whispered, "I think I need to find out the truth." It was a small key, silver, hanging from the edge of the dressing table mirror in my stepmother's room. I noticed it when I went in to return folded laundry. She was in the kitchen. I had only a minute. I grabbed the key and hid it in my pocket. That night, after everyone slept, I went to the guest room. The room was dark, cold. In the bottom drawer of the wooden shelf, I found a metal box. It had a lock. I held my breath and slid the key in. Click! Inside were more documents, some old envelopes, some photos, a small phone, and then a file with my name on it. Amara Iqbal, Guardian Information. I sat on the floor. My knees were shaking. I opened the file. The first page was a copy of my birth certificate. Next was a school form. Then, a paper I had never seen before. It had a stamp, a seal. It was a transfer of guardianship. The paper said my father had full guardianship of me after my mother died. But someone had written something in pencil in the corner. Expires when she turns 18. I stared at the word expires. Why would guardianship expire? Then I saw a second paper, a new one. It had my name again. But this time, it listed another name under Next Legal Guardian, a name I didn't know. Mrs. Zarina Ahmed. My hands went cold. Who was she, and why was she listed as my next guardian? I flipped the page over. There was a note, a short one, approved by both parties, to be moved to boarding by June 15th. My birthday. They were planning to send me away, without telling me, without even asking me. I pressed my hand to my chest. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't supposed to know. But now I did. The next day, I acted normal. I made tea. I washed dishes. I smiled when my father looked at me. But inside, I was screaming. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he agreed to give me to someone else? Had he stopped loving me, or had he never loved me in the first place? At night, I cried. But I didn't cry like a little girl. I cried like someone who had been lied to. I held my notebook close and wrote, I wasn't supposed to find out. But I did. And now, I don't know who to trust. I looked out the window. The moon was full, but I had never felt so small, so alone. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The papers were burned into my memory. The names, the signature, the date. They wanted to send me away, on my birthday. Like a gift they didn't want anymore. I felt like trash. All day, I kept asking myself one question. Why didn't my father tell me? That question hurt more than the answer. Because maybe I already knew the answer. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it. That evening, I waited for him to come home from work. When he walked in, I stood at the door. He looked surprised. Amara? I looked up at him and asked softly, Can we talk? He hesitated. Now? Yes. Please. He nodded. All right. Let's sit. We sat in the living room. The lights were low. The air felt heavy. I took a deep breath and looked at him. Are you sending me away? His face changed. His eyes narrowed slightly. His shoulders tensed. Where did you hear that? That's not an answer, I said. He looked at the floor for a long time. Then he sighed. It's complicated. No, I whispered. It's not. It's simple. You're either sending me away, or you're not. Silence. Then he said the words I never wanted to hear. Yes. I froze. He kept talking. It's not what you think. Zarina is a distant relative. She runs a boarding school for girls. She offered to take care of your higher education. I thought... You thought I wouldn't ask, I said. My voice cracked. You thought I wouldn't care. He looked tired. It's for your future. You'll get better opportunities there. I stared at him. Then why hide it? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. He knew it was wrong. He just didn't want to face me when I found out. I stood up. I'm not a bag of clothes. You can pass to someone else. He looked at me, then said coldly, You've always been difficult. That broke me. I turned away and walked out of the room. But just as I reached the stairs, I heard something. A sound. A voice. Faint. From the other room, I stopped. It wasn't the TV. It wasn't my stepmother. It was a whisper. I moved closer to the hallway. The guest room door was open again. Inside, my stepmother sat on the floor, speaking softly into a phone. She didn't see me. I stood behind the curtain, listening. I told him the girl knows. Something, she said. Pause. No, not everything. Just enough to get curious. Another pause. Yes. I'll make sure she doesn't speak to anyone else, especially not the boy. My stomach twisted. She was talking about me. And Timur, my brother. She continued, He's still soft on her, but once she's gone, we'll have full control. Just sign the papers when they arrive. Full control? What did she mean? And who was she talking to? I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My heart was pounding in my ears. I backed away, quietly. This wasn't just about sending me away. It was about something bigger, something deeper. Control, money, power, and I was in the middle of it, without even knowing why. Later that night, I knocked on Timur's door. He opened it, eyes half asleep. What happened? We need to talk, I whispered. He let me in. I told him everything. The papers, the transfer, the name Zarina Ahmed, the call I overheard. Timur sat there, silent. Then he said something I didn't expect. I've heard that name before. My eyes widened. Where? She used to visit us when we were little. I remember her perfume, strong and sweet. She used to bring gifts. Was she kind? He shook his head slowly. No. She smiled with her mouth. Not her eyes. That sentence chilled me. I asked, do you think she's the one behind all this? He looked at me, serious. I think she's part of it. But someone else is pulling the strings. Who? He didn't answer. But we both knew the answer already. Her, the woman who lived in our house. The woman who smiled when my father walked in and looked at me like I didn't belong. The next morning, I woke up early. Too early. The sun hadn't risen yet, but something had woken me. A sound. A voice. At first I thought I was dreaming. But it was real. Someone was calling my name. Amara. Soft, close. Sat up in bed. My room was dark. I looked around. No one. But then I heard it again. Amara. Don't trust them. I froze. The voice didn't sound like anyone in the house. It was older, gentler, and familiar. Who's there? I whispered. Silence. Then one final word. Journal, and it was gone. I jumped out of bed and turned on the light. No one. I checked the windows. The hall. Nothing. Was I going crazy, or was someone trying to help me? I stood in the middle of my room, breathing fast. Then I remembered something. My mother's old journal. I hadn't seen it in years. After she died, it was placed in the storage trunk in the attic. The attic no one ever opened anymore. 10 minutes. Later, I was standing in the dark attic, holding a flashlight. Dust covered everything. Old boxes, faded furniture, a broken chair. I moved slowly, carefully, and then, in the corner, I found it. The trunk. Brown leather. Rusty lock. I opened it. Inside were clothes, books, and then, under a red shawl, a diary. Black cover. Soft. Worn. I opened it. Page after page of my mother's handwriting. Flowing. Beautiful. She wrote about me. About my father. About her fears. And then, I found the last entry. It was dated 2 weeks before she died. My hands shook as I read it. I feel something dark around me. I don't know who to trust. There are people in this family who smile at me, but want me gone. I fear for my daughter. If anything happens to me, please, someone, someday, protect Amara. She is not safe here. I closed the book. Tears filled my eyes. My mother knew. She knew they didn't want us here. And she tried to warn me. A voice in the dark. her voice. I held the diary close to my chest. Now I had proof. Not just feelings. Not just fear. Words. Her words. The truth was hiding in this house for years, and now it was awake. I didn't go back to sleep. I sat in my room, holding the diary against my chest, watching the first light of morning creep through the curtains. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Protect Amara. She is not safe here. I always knew something felt wrong in this house. But now I had proof. She had felt it too. The coldness, the lies, the smiles with no warmth. She knew someone wanted her gone. And now they wanted me gone too. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not without a fight. At breakfast, I acted normal. I sat at the table, ate quietly, said nothing. My stepmother glanced at me a few times. Her smile was thin, fake. She knew something was different. And she was right. Inside me, a storm was growing. She asked, "Did you sleep well?" I nodded. "Yes. Thank you." She tilted her head. "You seem quiet today." "I have a lot on my mind," I replied. She smiled again, but this time her eyes were sharp, watching, measuring. I could feel her studying me, looking for cracks. She wouldn't find any. Not today. Because I had already made a decision. I was going to leave this house. Not when they wanted. Not where they planned. Not with their permission. I would run. After school, I went straight to Timur's room. He was playing a game on his phone. I locked the door behind me. He looked up. "What's wrong?" I pulled out the diary and placed it in his hands. Read. The last page. He did. And when he finished, he looked at me with wide eyes. "She knew," he whispered. I nodded. "I'm not crazy," I said, and neither was she. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" I looked at him and said, "Run." His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "You can't stay here either," I told him. "They're using you, just like they're using me." He looked down. "I know," he said softly. "But where would we go?" I had thought about that. There was only one person I could trust. The only adult who ever cared about me after my mother died. My old school librarian, Miss Farida. She had left town a year ago, but I still had her number. She always said I could call her if I ever needed anything. It was time to test if she meant it. That night I waited until the house was asleep. Then I called her. The phone rang once, twice. Then a warm voice answered. "Hello?" "Miss Farida?" I whispered. "It's Amara." There was silence on the other end, then softly, "Amara? Is everything all right?" "No," I said. "Can you help me?" "I'm listening." I told her everything. The papers, the woman named Zarina, my stepmother, my mother's diary. Didn't cry, not even once. I just spoke. Slowly, clearly. And when I finished, she said only one thing. "I'll be there tomorrow. Don't pack too much, just your important things." Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to stay brave until I get there." I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me, I was ready. The next day at breakfast, I kept the act going. I smiled. I thanked them. I even talked about school. But every move I made was part of a plan. I slipped my essentials into a small backpack, a few clothes, my mother's diary, and a photo of her and me from long ago. At lunch, I whispered to Timur, "After school." "Be ready." He gave the tiniest nod. No one noticed. But as I was leaving the house, my stepmother called out, "Amara." I turned. She was holding a white envelope. "Give this to your principal," she said. "It's your transfer letter." I stared at it, then took it slowly. My fingers were cold. "Thank you," I said. She smiled, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. She was sure she had won, but she hadn't. After school, I didn't wait. I went to the park down the street. Timur met me there. Miss Farida arrived a few minutes later. She stepped out of a small white car and opened her arms. Ran into them, and for the first time in years, I felt safe. We drove for hours. No one followed. Timur sat quietly in the back, holding my bag. Miss Farida didn't ask many questions. She just said, "You're not alone anymore." That night, she let us sleep in her guest room. We ate warm food, talked a little, laughed a little. It felt like breathing after holding your breath for too long. Before bed, I opened my mother's diary again. And this time, I wrote something. "Mama, I heard you. I followed your voice, and I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you for protecting me, even after you were gone." I closed the book, then turned off the light. But just before I fell asleep, I thought I heard her voice again. Just a whisper, just enough. "Good girl." And then there was only silence, the kind that doesn't scare you anymore, the kind that finally lets you rest. The next morning felt unreal. I woke up in a soft bed, in a room that smelled like lavender and safety. No footsteps in the hallway, no fake smiles, no heavy silence, just sunlight and the sound of birds. Timur was still asleep on the mattress beside my bed. I sat up slowly. It was the first morning in a long time where I didn't feel afraid. But I wasn't done. Needed answers. I needed to know who Zarina was, and why my mother had written her name over and over. Miss Farida was already up. She was sipping tea at the kitchen table and reading something on her laptop. She smiled when she saw me. "Sleep. Okay?" I nodded. "Thank you for everything." She waved her hand. "You don't have to thank me, Amara. What you did was brave." I looked down. "I need your help," I said. She leaned forward. "Of course. Tell me." I placed the diary on the table and opened the last few pages. I pointed to the name. Zarina. She's part of all this. Somehow, my mother wrote her name again and again. Miss Farida stared at it, then frowned. "That name sounds familiar," she murmured. "Let me check something." She turned back to her laptop and typed quickly. I watched the screen. For a few minutes there was nothing. Then she gasped softly. "Amara," she said, turning the screen toward me. "Look." It was an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Tragic. Death of businesswoman Zarina Aftab in suspicious fire." The photo underneath showed a woman in a long red dress, with sharp eyes and a confident smile. She looked powerful, but also familiar. I leaned closer. She worked with your mother, Miss Farida explained. They were business partners, opened a clothing store together. But after your mother died, Zarina's name disappeared too. My heart thudded. The article continued. Zarina Aftab was found dead in her home after a fire broke out. Authorities suspected foul play, but no arrests were made. I looked at the date, 2 weeks after my mother's funeral. I whispered, "She died right after my mom?" Miss Farida nodded. "She was the last person your mother trusted," she said softly. I stared at the photo. The way Zarina stood, proud, elegant, unafraid. I could see why my mother had liked her. But then, what happened? Why had she died, too? And why had no one investigated? We kept digging. More articles, more blogs, even an old video interview where my mother and Zarina talked about starting their dream boutique. In the video, they laughed together like sisters. Zarina said, "Women need to protect each other, especially when the world tries to silence us." My mother smiled at her and nodded. It hurt to watch, but I couldn't look away. Then we found something strange. Another article. But this one wasn't about Zarina or my mom. It was about my stepmother. She used a different name back then. But the photo was clear. It was her. She had once worked as a secretary for Zarina Aftab. I felt cold. "She worked for her?" I whispered. Miss Farida clicked on the article. It says she was fired suddenly. I sat back in my chair. Pieces were falling into place. My mother and Zarina were rising in the business world. Then my mother dies in a car crash. 2 weeks later, Zarina dies in a fire. And the woman who worked for them, she marries my father. Moves into our house. Takes over everything. That evening, Timur finally asked the question, what if she did something to them? We were sitting on the floor of the guest room, the diary open between us. I didn't answer at first. Then I said, "I don't know if she did it, but she knows something. That's why she wants me gone. That's why she didn't want me to. Find the papers." He nodded slowly. "Do you think we should go to the police?" I hesitated. What could we prove? A diary? Old newspaper clippings? There were no fingerprints. No evidence. Only suspicions. And yet, the truth was there. Somewhere beneath the silence. I looked at him. "Not yet," I said. "But soon." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought of my mother and Zarina. I imagined them sitting in the shop they built, laughing over tea, planning dreams. 2 strong women. 2 missing voices. Someone had tried to erase them. But I was still here, and I wasn't going to be erased. Not quietly. Not ever. The next morning, I made a decision. "I want to visit the boutique," I told Miss Farida. "The one they opened together." She raised an eyebrow. "It's been closed for years." "I still want to go." She studied me, then nodded. "I'll take you." The boutique was on a quiet street. The sign was faded, but still hanging. Zay Designs. Zarina and Amara. I reached out and touched the letters. My mother's name. Right there, in paint and wood. The door was locked. Dust covered the glass. But I pressed my forehead against the window and looked inside. Shelves, mannequins, a broken mirror. Fabric pieces still pinned to a corkboard, like time had stopped. I turned to Miss Farida. "Can I go in?" She hesitated, then handed me a key. I blinked. "You have the key?" "I helped them with the paperwork," she said. Zarina gave me a copy, just in case. I smiled, then opened the door. Inside, the air was musty and still, but it felt like home, like memory. I walked slowly, ran my fingers along the shelves. In the back, I found a small office, and on the desk, a dusty black folder. I opened it. Inside were letters, receipts, contracts, and one photo. My mother and Zarina, holding hands and smiling at the camera. Behind them, a woman stood off to the side, watching, her face half hidden in shadow. But I recognized her, my stepmother. She had been there from the very beginning. I held the photo tight, and I knew what I had to do. This story wasn't over. But now, I had the thread, and I was going to pull it until the whole truth unraveled. I held the photo for a long time, my mother, Zarina, and her, standing in the background, watching. I knew that face too well. My stepmother had been part of their world, before the lies, before the silence. But what had she done? And why did no one talk about it? When I got back to Miss Farida's house, I showed her the photo. She stared at it in shock. "That's her," I whispered. "She was there, all along." Miss Farida nodded slowly. "She said she left after being fired. But this picture, this is after that. Why was she still hanging around?" I sat down on the edge of the couch. She didn't just appear out of nowhere. She was watching them, maybe even jealous, waiting for a chance. And then, Miss Farida added, "Your mother dies, then Zarina, then she marries your father." It was no longer just a theory. It was a pattern, a plan. Timur leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What do we do now?" I hesitated. "We need someone who knew Zarina well," I said. "Someone who might still remember." Miss Farida thought for a moment. "There was a man named Haris Qureshi. He handled some legal work for Zarina. He used to visit the shop. Maybe he knows more." I nodded. "Can you take me to him?" She smiled. "Get your shoes." Mr. Harris lived in a small flat above an electronics shop. He was older now, in his 70s, with kind eyes and a voice that shook slightly when he spoke. He invited us in for tea. When I showed him the photo, his expression changed. "I remember this," he said, tracing a finger over Zarina's face. "It was taken just a few weeks before everything fell apart." He looked up at me. "Why are you asking about her?" I took a deep breath. "Because I think someone tried to destroy their lives. And I think they're still trying to hide it." He studied me. "You're Amara? Fatima's daughter?" I nodded. He sighed. "You look like her." A pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Zarina was scared in the end." My heart jumped. Scared of who? He looked down. "She came to me one night, said something was wrong, that someone had been following her, asking questions about money, about the shop. She didn't say who it was, but she was different, nervous, always looking over her shoulder. Did she mention my mother? Yes, he said. She said Fatima had left something behind. Something important, and that she was trying to keep it safe. What was it? He shook his head. She never told me. I left the flat with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. My mother had left behind something. Something Zarina tried to protect, and someone wanted it buried. Forever. That night I sat with the diary again. There were no more pages, no more clues. But I stared at the handwriting, at the curve of my mother's letters. Then I remembered something. When I was small, my mother used to tell me bedtime stories, fairy tales, adventures. But always, she would say the same thing before I closed my eyes. If you ever feel lost, follow the red thread. I had never understood what it meant, until now. I went back to the boutique. Taimur came with me. We searched everything, the drawers, the walls, under the floorboards. Nothing. Then I saw it. A sewing basket. In the corner. I opened it. Inside were spools of thread, all colors, but at the bottom, one spool of red. I pulled it out. There was something strange about it. It was heavier than the others. I turned it slowly, and it clicked open. Inside was a tiny roll of paper. I unrolled it. It was a list of names, people, and next to each name, numbers, dates, bank details, a ledger. Money had been moved, laundered, hidden, and one of the names, my stepmother. Taimur looked over my shoulder. She was stealing from the shop, he whispered. Not just stealing, I said. She was helping someone move money, dirty money. My mom must have found out. He looked up at me, and that's why they had to disappear. I didn't sleep that night. The truth was finally in front of me, but it wasn't enough to know. I had to do something. I had to make it matter. The next morning, I went to the police station. Miss Farida came with me. I handed them everything. The photo, the ledger, the articles, the red thread. At first, the officer looked skeptical, but then he saw the names. His eyes widened. This, he said, could be very serious. He asked for my full statement, and I gave it, all of it. My voice didn't shake once. When we left the station, it started to rain. Taimur held the umbrella over both of us. You think they'll arrest her? He asked. I don't know, I said. But they'll start asking questions, and she won't have answers. We stood quietly for a moment. Then he smiled a little. You followed the red thread. I smiled back. Yeah, I did. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was the officer. He spoke calmly. We've opened an official investigation, he said. Your stepmother, she's already hired a lawyer. I closed my eyes. It was starting. The truth was finally waking up. And this time, it wasn't going back to sleep. The knock on the door came early. Too early. I opened it slowly. A police officer stood there. Calm, firm. Is this the residence of Mrs. Mehnaz Rahim? I nodded. She's my stepmother. He handed me a paper. This is a notice. She is being called for questioning regarding financial misconduct and possible involvement in an unresolved death investigation. He didn't need to say more. I already knew. When Mehnaz returned that afternoon, her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. She saw me holding the paper. Her face turned pale. "What is this?" she snapped. I stayed quiet. "I asked you a question, Amara." I handed her the notice. She read it quickly, then again, her fingers shaking. "Don't understand. What is this about?" I stared at her. "You do understand," I said quietly. "You've always understood." She didn't speak to me after that. Not for hours. But I watched her, pacing, whispering on the phone, shredding papers. She looked less like the woman I had known, and more like a frightened stranger in a fancy dress. Later that night, I heard her crying. Not loud, just a slow, bitter sound behind her locked door. The next morning she was gone. Her room was empty, her closet half-packed, a few drawers left open, but her car was still outside. That meant she hadn't left town, just hiding, waiting. I didn't feel scared. I felt calm, like the fog in my chest had finally lifted. 2 days later, the boutique received a letter. It was from the bank. An investigation had begun into irregular financial activity during the time Zarina was alive, and afterward, they wanted access to all employee records. I handed it over. No hesitation. The truth was stronger now than any lie. Miss Farida helped me reopen the boutique. We cleaned everything, repaired shelves, reorganized the displays. For the first time in years, the place felt alive again. Customers returned slowly, curious, cautious. They asked about the changes. We told them the truth, that it was under new care, that the darkness was finally gone. Timur stayed close. Every day, he came by to help with something. Fixing a bulb, polishing the glass, bringing me tea. But mostly, just standing beside me. Quiet support. Strong when I needed to be weak. One night, we sat on the rooftop, looking at the city lights. I held the red thread in my hand, now empty, the secret message already gone. "You did it," he said softly. "No," I said. "We did." He smiled, but I wasn't finished. "There's still one thing I need to do." The graveyard was silent. I found their stones easily. Fatima Rahim, Zarina Parvina, I knelt between them. The wind was cold. I placed a single jasmine flower on each grave. "I'm sorry it took me so long," I whispered. "But I found it. The truth. I know what you were trying to protect." I placed the spool of red thread beside my mother's stone. It led me all the way back to you. That night, I dreamt of her. Her smile, her voice, her hands running through my hair. I woke up, with tears on my face, but they weren't painful. They felt clean. A week passed, then another. One morning, I opened the newspaper. Front page, former boutique manager under investigation for financial fraud. Linked to deaths from 12 years ago. There was her photo. Stiff, pale. My stepmother. The story had reached everyone. Her world had truly begun to fall apart. People started talking. Some defended her, others whispered that they always knew something was wrong. But no one looked at me the same again. They saw a girl who had walked through fire, and come out holding a match. Later that week, I received a letter, handwritten, from my father. I hadn't spoken to him since the investigation began. It read, "Amara, I don't know what to say. Everything feels like a lie now. I don't know what's true anymore. But I saw the papers. I saw what you did. I'm not angry. Just broken. I should have protected your mother and you. I hope one day you can forgive me." Dad, I stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it, placed it inside the diary. The story was nearly over. But something had changed in me. I wasn't just the girl with no answers anymore. I had found my mother's truth, uncovered a trail buried deep under silence. And I had learned something powerful. Sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to feel safe. But the truth sets you free, even if it breaks everything first. The sun rose slowly that morning, just as it always did, casting soft light over the city. But this time, something felt different. It was not the usual start to my day. I felt a sense of peace I had not known in a long time. For the first time in years, I stood up from bed and didn't feel the weight of guilt, shame, or fear hanging over me. Instead, there was just quiet. A quiet that had settled deep inside, like a calm after a storm. I walked to the window and looked outside. The street was busy, as usual. People rushing to their jobs, cars honking, children running to school. Life was moving on, despite everything I had been through. But today, I was no longer part of that world of silence. I was part of the world of truth. I had learned to stand tall again, to find my voice after years of hiding it. It felt strange, but good. The boutique was busy that day. I could hear the hum of voices, the sound of footsteps. For the first time, it felt like a home to me, not just a place I worked. I smiled at the customers who walked in, greeting them with a warmth I had not felt in years. They seemed to notice it too, the change in me, the confidence, the calmness, the peace. Timur came in as usual bringing tea, but today there was something different about him as well. We shared a moment of silence, just sitting there, sipping the warm tea. Finally, he spoke. "You did it, Amara." I nodded, but the words didn't feel as important now. "I did," I said quietly. But it wasn't just me. The investigation had taken its toll on Menaz. She was gone, disappeared, just like everything else she had stolen. No one knew where she had gone, but it didn't matter anymore. I had what mattered, the truth. Zarina's memory was no longer tainted by the lies. She could rest in peace now, and so could I. Days passed, and slowly, I found myself healing. I stopped, looking back at the shadows that had once haunted me. I stopped wondering what could have been if I had taken a different path. Instead, I looked forward, to a life I was starting to shape for myself. I began to focus on the little things, the things I had long forgotten. A book I had once loved but never finished. A walk in the park without feeling rushed or scared. Simple moments that brought me joy without the burden of guilt or regret. One evening, I received a letter. It was from the court. The investigation into Menaz was officially closed. They had found the evidence they needed to charge her. The trial was set to begin soon. But for me, it didn't matter anymore. The truth had already set me free. The court would decide her fate, but I had already decided my own. Timur asked me one night, as we sat on the roof again, if I ever thought about my father. I nodded slowly. I think about him sometimes. I wonder if he will ever understand what happened, if he will ever feel sorry for what he did. Timur's gaze softened. You don't need his apology, Amara. You have already forgiven yourself. That is all that matters. I looked at him. No, but part of me still wishes he could have been the father I needed. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. You are not alone anymore. You have your own strength now. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day I grew stronger. The boutique flourished, and more customers returned, curious about the changes, excited about the fresh start. I poured myself into it, not just for the business, but for me. It was my new beginning. I still thought about my mother. I still missed her. But the sadness was no longer heavy. It had transformed into something different, a quiet love that I held close. I would never forget her. But I could finally live without the weight of the past holding me back. One morning, I woke up and realized something. I had finally forgiven myself for the mistakes I had made, for the guilt I had carried, for everything I had thought was my fault. I had learned the most important lesson of all. We cannot change what has happened, but we can choose how we move forward. Later that day, I stood outside the boutique, looking at the sky as the sun began to set. It was beautiful. The colors in the sky were rich, warm, full of life. Just like me now. I smiled, not because I had forgotten, but because I had survived. I had made it through the hardest part, and I was stronger now than I had ever been. As I closed the door to the boutique that evening, I whispered to myself, I am free, and I am not afraid anymore. The rain started to fall just as I finished closing the boutique for the night. It was a soft, steady rain, the kind that tapped gently against the window, creating a soothing sound. I had always liked the rain. There was something about it that made the world feel quieter, more peaceful. I stood there for a moment, looking out the window. The streets outside were empty now, the hustle and bustle of the day finally fading away. The city seemed to take a deep breath, as if it, too, was resting. I could hear the soft patter of the rain, but there was no other sound. No conversations. No footsteps. No honking cars. Just the rain and the quiet. It was a silence I had longed for, a silence that had eluded me for so many years. The noise of my past, the hurt, the betrayal, it was finally gone. And now, I was left with the calm. I walked slowly to the small corner of the boutique where I liked to sit. It was a cozy spot, with a soft chair by the window. I sat down, wrapping a warm blanket around my shoulders, and let out a slow breath. I was alone, and yet, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. The past few months had been full of change. So much had happened, and so much had shifted within me. But tonight, as the rain fell outside, it was all still. It was as if everything was settled, as if I could finally rest, I thought about how far I had come. The journey had not been easy, and there were days when I thought I would never make it through, but I had. I had survived everything life had thrown at me, and now I was healing. There were no more secrets, no more lies, no more fear, and no more guilt. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of all those years of struggle lifting off me. It was like stepping out of a shadow and into the light. I had found peace within myself. I had forgiven myself for everything I thought I could never forgive. The world was quiet, but my heart was full of gratitude, full of hope, and full of love for the woman I was becoming. I sat there for what felt like hours, watching the rain and letting the quiet wash over me. The rain had always been a comfort to me, a reminder that even the darkest moments could pass, that everything would eventually change, even if it took time. I thought about my father again. I had not thought about him much in recent days, not because I had forgotten, but because I had let go. There was no more anger, no more longing for him to be the father I had always wished for. The truth was, he was not the man I had hoped him to be. But that was not my burden to carry anymore. I had come to terms with it, and in doing so, I had freed myself from that pain. As the rain continued to fall outside, I found myself smiling softly. For the first time in years, I had peace. True peace. I had learned to love myself, to accept all the pieces of who I was, the good, the bad, and everything in between. I had learned to forgive not just others, but myself. I had learned that it was okay to feel hurt, to feel lost, and to feel broken, but it was also okay to heal. It was okay to move on. And so, in that quiet moment, as the rain fell softly against the window, I made a promise to myself. I would never go back to the person I was before. The one who was afraid, the one who was broken, the one who let others define her. I was stronger now. I knew who I was. And I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with the same quiet strength that had carried me this far. Eventually, the rain slowed to a stop. The streets outside were damp, but the air felt fresh, clean, and new. I stood up from my seat, stretched my arms above my head, and smiled. Tomorrow would be a new day, just like today had been. But I was no longer the same person I had been. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone wiser, and most importantly, I was someone who had finally found her way back to herself. I walked to the door and turned off the lights, feeling a sense of finality, not in a sad way, but in a way that said I was done. I was done with the past. I was done with the hurt. I locked the door and stepped out into the cool, quiet night. And for the first time, I felt truly at peace. The next few days felt like a blur. I moved through them as though I was in a fog, going through the motions of life, but never truly living. I tried to keep myself busy, to fill my mind with distractions, but the questions I could not answer lingered. I needed to know. I needed the truth. There was no way around it anymore. I had reached a point where silence could not keep me safe. I could not keep pretending that everything was fine when deep down I knew something was wrong. I had to face it. It was late one evening when I decided to confront him. I had spent the whole day working, trying to ignore the anxiety gnawing at my chest. But as the sun set and the last rays of light faded away, I felt that same heaviness again. I knew I had no choice. I sat on the couch, my hands shaking slightly, my mind racing with questions. What would he say? What would I do if he denied everything? What if the truth was worse than I imagined? I could hear the sound of his footsteps outside the door. He was coming. I could feel his presence even before he entered the room. When he finally walked through the door, I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He knew something was coming, just as I did. There was a tension in the air, thick and heavy, like something was about to break. I took a deep breath and stood up, trying to steady my nerves. The words were already on the tip of my tongue, but I had to say them clearly, without hesitation. "Are you going to tell me the truth?" I asked. My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking. His eyes shifted away for a moment. That was the first sign, the first crack in the mask. He hesitated before replying, his voice low and careful. "What truth are you talking about?" The words hit me like a cold gust of wind. I had hoped for more, something that would put my heart at ease. But all I got was a response that felt like a wall, one that blocked me from the answers I needed. I felt a wave of frustration rising in my chest. I had hoped that this moment would bring clarity, but instead, it just left me with more questions. "I need to know what happened," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to understand what you have been hiding." He looked at me, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He was avoiding my gaze, like he was searching for the right words, or maybe for a way out. But there was no way out now. Not for him, not for me. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a sharp pang in my chest at his words. It was the same excuse he had given before, the same thing he had said when things first started to unravel. But it no longer held the weight it once did. I had heard it too many times, and each time it felt emptier. "Then why did you?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly despite myself. "Why did you lie to me?" He did not answer right away, and for a moment, we both stood there in silence. The tension was unbearable, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. The silence between us felt heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, he spoke again. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I kept it hidden, things would stay the same." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that his intentions had been pure, that his mistakes were just a result of fear or confusion. But the truth was, I could no longer ignore the signs. The lies, the secrets, the way he had slowly pulled away from me. It was all too much. "I don't want to live like this anymore," I said, my voice stronger now. "I don't want to wonder what the truth is. I need answers." He looked at me, his face filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you." But his apology no longer felt enough. It didn't change what had happened, what was still happening. And in that moment, I realized something. Had spent so long hoping for the truth, hoping for a sign that things could go back to the way they were, but I knew now that it could never be the same again. Too much had happened. Too much had been lost. I stepped back, the weight of his words sinking in. I had been holding on for too long, waiting for him to make things right, to fix what he had broken. but I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't keep giving him the power to control my happiness, my peace. "Maybe you never wanted to hurt me," I said, my voice steady, but filled with emotion. "But you did, and I can't keep pretending it doesn't hurt." There was a long silence after that. He did not speak. He just stood there looking at me, his expression filled with guilt and sorrow. But I knew that this was the moment I could no longer stay in this space of uncertainty. I needed the truth. And even if it was painful, even if it changed everything, I had to know. "I need an answer," I whispered. "And I need you to be honest with me." He didn't answer right away. And in that silence, I realized something important. It was not just the truth I was seeking anymore. It was closure. It was the freedom to move forward, to stop holding on to something that no longer existed. I had to let go, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much I wanted things to be different. The truth was, this was no longer my fight. I looked at him one last time, waiting for a response. But it was clear now. The truth was something he was not ready to share. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to stop waiting for it. Days passed after our conversation, but nothing changed. The silence between us grew louder, echoing in the empty spaces of our home. Every time I looked at him, I felt a growing distance. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper. Something I couldn't explain. I had spent so much time trying to figure out what to do, what would be the right thing. I kept telling myself that I needed to be strong, that I needed to make a decision. But the truth was, I had been afraid to make one. I had been afraid of what would happen if I chose to leave, but now it was clear. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep waiting for something to change, for him to suddenly become the person I needed him to be. The truth was, we were no longer the same people we had been when we first met. Things had shifted, and no amount of pretending could make them go back to how they once were. I woke up one morning, the sunlight streaming in through the window, but it felt different. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me, urging me to face the reality of the situation. I looked at him as he slept beside me, his face relaxed in peaceful sleep. He looked so different from the person I had known, and yet, there, he was, lying next to me, unaware of the storm that had been brewing inside me. I stood up quietly, careful not to wake him, and walked to the window. I looked outside at the world beyond, the streets busy with people going about their lives, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. It wasn't just the situation with him, it was everything. The lies, the doubts, the feeling that I had lost myself somewhere along the way. I knew then that I had a choice to make. A hard choice, one that would change everything. I could stay, hoping things would improve, hoping that somehow he would come around and become the person I needed. Or I could walk away, face the fear of the unknown, and take control of my own life again. I spent the entire day thinking, weighing my options, but there was only one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. I had to take the first step, even if it meant walking away from everything I had known. That evening, after dinner, I sat him down. I could see the nervousness in his eyes, the way he avoided my gaze. He must have known what was coming. I had seen it in his expression, heard it in his silence. I think it's time we talk, I said quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. He nodded, his lips pressed together in a tight line. He didn't speak, just waited for me to continue. I've been thinking a lot, I said, struggling to find the right words. And I've realized something important. I can't keep waiting for things to change. I can't keep living in this limbo. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, as if looking for some kind of reassurance. But there was no reassurance to give. I had already made up my mind. I don't want to keep pretending that everything is okay, I continued, because it's not. It hasn't been for a long time. His face softened, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. He didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to face what was happening, but I could no longer keep it inside. I need to move on, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I need to find my own way, to find peace again. For a moment, there was only silence between us. He stared at me, his face filled with a mixture of disbelief and sadness. I could see the weight of the words I had just spoken settling on him. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I could fix it. I know you didn't mean for this to happen, I replied, my voice soft but firm. But sometimes, even the best intentions aren't enough. He didn't say anything more. He just sat there, his shoulders slumped, the weight of everything sinking in. I could see the tears welling up in his eyes, and for a moment, I wanted to reach out to him. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay. But I knew I couldn't. Not anymore. This wasn't about him. This was about me. I've made my decision, I said quietly, and I can't change it. He nodded slowly, his face pale, and he stood up, walking toward the door. I understand, he said, his voice hoarse. I hope you find what you're looking for. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I was left standing in the silence. The weight of the moment settled over me, but it wasn't as heavy as I had imagined. It felt freeing. The decision had been made. There was no turning back, but I didn't want to. I had taken control of my own life again. I went to the window and looked out at the world beyond. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It felt like a new beginning. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. And that was enough. The next few days felt strange. At first it was quiet, too quiet. The house, which had once been filled with tension, was now just empty space, echoing with memories of what had been. I didn't know where to start, or even how to feel. It was like I had stepped out of one world and into another, one that was unfamiliar and uncertain. I spent most of my time alone, trying to process everything. I went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, and running errands. But my mind was always elsewhere. Every time I walked through the house, I saw reminders of him. His shoes by the door, the jacket he always left on the back of the chair, the empty spot beside me in bed. It all felt like a cruel reminder of what I had let go. But despite the sadness, there was also a feeling of freedom. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me feel whole. I wasn't living in someone else's shadow, hoping that they would change so I could feel better about myself. It was a strange and unsettling kind of freedom, but it was mine. I had always been so afraid of being alone. I had convinced myself that I needed someone else to be happy, to feel complete. But now, I was starting to see things differently. I didn't need anyone to define me. I was enough, just as I was. One evening, after a long day of running errands, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my mind, to step outside and breathe in the fresh air. It had been a while since I had done something for myself, without any worries or distractions. The sun was setting as I walked through the park, the golden light casting long shadows on the ground. The trees were full of life, their leaves rustling in the breeze. I walked slowly, taking in the peaceful surroundings, trying to quiet the thoughts in my head. As I walked, I passed a bench where an elderly woman was sitting, reading a book. She looked up as I approached, her eyes meeting mine with a warm smile. I smiled back, and for a moment I felt like I had known her forever. "Lovely evening, isn't it?" she said softly, her voice gentle. "It is," I replied, surprised at how easily the words came out. "It's nice to get out of the house for a while," she nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Sometimes, we all need a little space to breathe. Life has a way of overwhelming us, doesn't it?" I paused, unsure of how to respond, but her words felt like they were meant for me. I had been overwhelmed for so long, trapped in a cycle of fear and doubt. I had been so focused on trying to fix something that wasn't working that I had forgotten to take care of myself. "You're right," I said, sitting down on the bench beside her. "I've been so caught up in everything that I forgot to breathe." She smiled, her expression warm and understanding. "It's easy to get lost in the chaos of life, but remember, it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to find your own peace." I looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. I had spent so much time worrying about what was happening around me that I had forgotten to focus on what was happening inside me. I had forgotten to take care of my own heart, my own soul. "I think I've been holding on to something for too long," I said, my voice soft. "And now I'm learning to let go." The woman nodded, her eyes gentle. "Letting go isn't easy, but it's often the first step toward finding your true self. It's like cleaning out a closet. You have to get rid of what's no longer serving you in order to make space for something better." I smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Her words felt like a gift, a reminder that I was on the right path. It wasn't easy, and there would be hard days ahead. But I knew I was making the right choice. I was finally choosing myself. As the evening wore on, I left the park, my heart a little lighter. I walked back home, feeling the weight of my decision lift from my shoulders, even if just a little. The silence in the house didn't feel so heavy anymore. I knew I had made the right decision, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The next few weeks were full of change. I took time to focus on myself, reading, journaling, spending time with friends, and rediscovering the things I had lost along the way. I started exercising again, something I had neglected for too long. I began to make plans for my future, thinking about what I wanted for myself, what made me happy. And though there were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether I had made the right choice, I never once regretted it. The peace I felt within myself was more than worth the pain of the past. I knew I was on a journey, one that was all my own. One evening, as I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the sunset, I realized something important. I was no longer afraid of being alone. I had learned to be comfortable with my own company, to enjoy the quiet moments, and to trust that I was strong enough to handle whatever came my way. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what was to come. I was ready to start fresh, to embrace the unknown, and to create the life I had always dreamed of. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. The days blurred together as I moved through my routine. I had good days, bad days, and some that were a mix of both. The journey wasn't linear. There were steps forward, followed by steps back. But through it all, I started to notice something I hadn't before. Peace. It was subtle at first, like the calm after a storm. But as time went on, I began to feel it more clearly. I'd wake up in the mornings, not filled with dread or anxiety, but with a quiet sense of possibility. The days felt a little brighter, even when the sky was cloudy. I started looking forward to the little things: a cup of tea in the morning, the sound of birds outside my window, the feeling of the sun on my skin. There was no rush anymore, no pressure to be perfect or to make everything work all at once. I was learning to let life unfold, taking things one step at a time. One afternoon, I went for another walk in the park. The air was crisp, and the leaves had started to change color, painting the world in shades of gold and red. It was beautiful. As I walked, I noticed more people than usual out enjoying the day. Families were gathered around picnic tables. Children were playing in the grass, and couples walked hand in hand, talking and laughing. It reminded me of how much beauty there was in simple moments. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. I was grateful for this moment of stillness. The weight of the past no longer held me down. The path ahead wasn't completely clear, but I didn't need it to be. I was finally able to trust that I was capable of handling whatever came my way. As I walked, I saw the elderly woman again. She was sitting on the same bench, her book resting in her lap. She smiled when she saw me approach, and I felt a warmth in my chest as I sat down beside her. "Hello again," I said, my voice soft. "Hello, my dear," she replied, her eyes twinkling. "How are you today?" "I'm doing better," I said, smiling. "I've been taking things one day at a time." "That's the key," she said, nodding. "Life is made up of little moments, and we have to learn to appreciate them as they come." I smiled, remembering her words from our last conversation. She was right. I had been so focused on the big picture, the things that I couldn't control, that I had missed the beauty in the small moments. "I've learned that," I said. "It's easy to get caught up in everything, but sometimes it's the quiet moments that make all the difference." She nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes we have to slow down in order to see the blessings around us. Life isn't always about doing, it's also about being." Her words echoed in my mind as I walked home that day. It was a simple reminder, but one I needed. I had been so focused on achieving and fixing things that I had forgotten the importance of simply being present. Being with myself, in the moment, without any distractions or expectations, I began to embrace this new way of living. I allowed myself to enjoy the quiet, to rest without guilt, and to find joy in the little things. I started saying no to things that drained me, and saying yes to things that brought me peace. I wasn't perfect at it, but I was trying. One day, I decided to take a day off from everything. No work, no errands, no plans, just a day to relax and recharge. I spent the morning reading a book I had been meaning to finish. Then I took a long walk in the park. I had lunch with a friend, and later, I sat by the window and watched the sunset, feeling content in the quiet. That evening, as I lay in bed, I felt a deep sense of peace. I wasn't waiting for something to change or for things to get better. I wasn't focused on the past or worried about the future. I was simply at peace with where I was. And that was enough. It wasn't a loud, overwhelming feeling. It wasn't something that hit me all at once. It was a quiet, steady kind of peace. The kind that grows over time, as you learn to let go of what no longer serves you and make room for what truly matters. The days continued to pass, and I kept moving forward, one step at a time. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I was making the right decisions. But even in those moments, I knew I was on the right path. I was learning to trust myself, to trust that I had the strength and the wisdom to handle whatever came my way. And slowly, I began to realize something else. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was truly living in a way I hadn't in a long time. The future still felt uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready to face whatever came next, with peace in my heart and hope in my soul. There were days when the weight of the past would sneak up on me, catching me off guard. It was not always painful, but it was hard to ignore. I would find myself looking at old photos, memories of a time when everything felt simpler. The smiles, the laughter, the way the world seemed to fit together so perfectly. But those days were gone, and no matter how much I wanted to hold on to them, I could not. I had spent so many years hoping that time would heal all wounds, and it did, to some extent. But some things could never be forgotten. The echoes of past moments, even the ones that brought me joy, still lingered in the corners of my mind. I remembered the sound of my mother's laughter as she cooked dinner in the kitchen, the way the kitchen always smelled of spices and warmth, the scent wrapping around me like a hug. She would call out to me, asking me to set the table, and I would rush to do it, always eager to help. I missed those moments more than I could put into words. It wasn't just about the things we did, but about how they made me feel. Loved. Safe. I would do anything to go back to those times, even if just for a moment. But the past, as comforting as it could be, was also full of sadness. As much as I miss those days, I could never go back to them, and maybe I didn't want to. I had changed, and the world had changed with me. The girl I was then was not the girl I was now. I had grown, and though I missed some things, I knew that I could not remain in the past forever. Some mornings, I would wake up and, for just a second, feel as though everything was as it had been before. I would remember the mornings when my family would gather around the kitchen table for breakfast, laughing about silly things and sharing stories. My father's voice, strong and reassuring, would call out from the other room as he prepared to leave for work. The house would be filled with warmth and the sound of life. I missed those days. The way my parents seemed to have everything figured out. The way I felt so secure, so certain that everything would be okay. But as the years went on, things changed. People changed. And I had to learn to adapt to a new reality. There were times when I would sit quietly, thinking about what could have been. I wondered how different things would be if things had not gone wrong. Would I still be that same girl, carefree and full of hope? Or would I have learned something else, something that would have made me stronger, but also more guarded? I did not have all the answers, but I had learned one thing. No matter how much I missed the past, I could not go back. I had to move forward. It was not easy. The pull of old memories was strong, but I had learned that healing did not mean forgetting. It meant accepting the past for what it was and letting go of the hold it had on me. One afternoon, as I sat in my room looking through an old album, I came across a photo of my family on vacation. We were all laughing together, standing at the edge of a cliff, with the ocean stretching out before us. It was one of those moments when everything seemed perfect, when we were all together, enjoying life. I smiled at the picture, but the smile was bittersweet. It reminded me of how much I had changed, of how much had changed around me. And for a moment, I felt a pang of longing for those days. But then, as I held the photo in my hands, I felt a sense of peace. That version of me, that version of my family, would always be a part of me. But it was not who I was now. I had a new life now. A life that had been shaped by all that had happened, the good, the bad, and everything in between. I had learned from it all. And even though I missed the past, I realized that I could cherish those memories without allowing them to hold me back. It was time to let go. Not of the love I had for those moments, but of the need to live in them. I could carry them with me, keep them close in my heart, but I did not have to live in them. I could make new memories, create new moments of happiness, without constantly looking over my shoulder at what I had lost. I sat by the window, looking out at the world outside. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. The streets were quiet and the air was cool and fresh. I took a deep breath, feeling the calm settle within me. I missed the past, but I was ready to move forward. I sat on the couch, my mind still tangled with thoughts of the past. There were days when the weight of everything would press down on me, and it felt like I could not breathe. The silence of the house felt louder than any noise. The emptiness that had once seemed comforting now felt like a reminder of all that was missing. It was one of those days when I felt the need to talk to someone who could understand, or at least try. I reached for my phone and dialed Sarah's number. She had been my friend for years, and even though we had both gone our separate ways, I knew she was someone I could always turn to. She answered quickly, her voice warm as always. "Hey, how are you doing?" I hesitated for a moment. How was I doing? It was hard to answer that question. I am okay. I need someone to talk to. There was a pause on the other end. Of course, she said softly. What's going on? I took a deep breath, unsure of where to start. How could I explain everything that had happened? How could I put into words all the emotions that had built up over the months? I have been thinking a lot about the past, I began. I miss certain things, certain people, but at the same time, I know I cannot go back. Things have changed, and I I am not the same person I was. Sarah listened quietly, not interrupting. I could hear the understanding in her silence, and it gave me the courage to continue. I feel like I have lost something. Something important, but I do not know how to move on. She paused before speaking again. It's okay to miss the past, she said. We all do, at times. But you cannot let it control you. You are not the same person you were, and that's a good thing. You have grown, and you have learned. You have the strength to move forward, even if it feels hard right now. Her words hit me in a way that I had not expected. It was like a light had been switched on in the darkness of my mind. I realized that I had been so focused on what I had lost that I had forgotten to acknowledge what I had gained. The person I was now was stronger, more self-aware. I had faced so much, and I was still standing. I know, I said quietly, my voice shaking. It just feels like a part of me is missing. That's okay too, Sarah replied. We all have those moments, but you do not have to go through this alone. You have people who care about you, and I am here for you. Always. I felt a warmth spread through me at her words. It had been so long since I had felt truly heard, truly understood. Talking to Sarah was like a balm for my soul. It reminded me that I was not as alone as I sometimes felt. I miss the way things were, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I miss feeling happy, feeling whole. But I do not know how to get back to that. You do not have to go back, Sarah said gently. You just have to take small steps, one day at a time. You will get there. I closed my eyes, feeling the tears well up. But I did not let them fall. I had been holding on to so much for so long. Talking to Sarah was like opening a door that I had kept closed for too long. The feelings that I had buried deep inside were starting to come to the surface, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like it was okay to let them out. I am scared, I whispered. I am scared of moving on, scared of what the future holds. Sarah's voice softened. I know, but you have already come so far. You are stronger than you think, and you do not have to face the future alone. Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. I had been afraid of what lay ahead, but now I realized that I did not have to walk this path by myself. I had friends, I had people who cared, and I had myself. I think I am starting to understand, I said, a sense of clarity beginning to wash over me. I have to let go. I have to let go of the past, of what I thought things should have been, and I have to trust that the future will be better, even if I do not know exactly what it will look like. That's it, Sarah said. You are on the right track. Just keep moving forward, and the rest will come. I smiled, a real smile, not the kind that I forced for the sake of others. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. It was not easy, and I knew there would be more struggles ahead, but I also knew that I had the strength to face them. I am glad I called you, I said, my voice steady now. Thank you for always being there. I will always be here, she replied, no matter what. I hung up the phone with a sense of peace that I had not felt in a long time. I was not alone. I had people who cared, and I had myself, which was something I had forgotten to believe in for too long. I was ready to face whatever came next. The days passed by slowly, like clouds drifting in the sky, each one blending into the other. It had been a few weeks since my conversation with Sarah, and although the weight in my chest had not disappeared completely, I felt lighter. Her words kept echoing in my mind. One day at a time, you will get there. I tried to remind myself of that every morning when I woke up, especially when the quiet of the house felt overwhelming, or when the memories tried to sneak in, uninvited. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had made the decision to step out for a walk. The weather was crisp, and the sunlight made everything look brighter, more alive. I pulled on my jacket and stepped out the door, feeling the cool air against my skin. It felt good to be outside, to move, even if just a little. As I walked down the street, I noticed the little things, the sound of children playing, the scent of fresh bread wafting from a nearby bakery, the rustling of the leaves in the trees. It was like I had forgotten how to truly see the world around me, how to appreciate the beauty in the small, everyday moments. I continued walking, my thoughts swirling. But this time, they didn't feel as heavy. It was like the act of being outside had given me a little room to breathe. Maybe I was getting better. Maybe there was hope after all. I walked for about an hour, just letting my mind wander. When I reached the park, I sat on one of the benches, watching as people jogged past. Couples walked hand in hand, and children ran around laughing. For a moment, I felt like an outsider, like I didn't belong in their world of happiness and ease. But then, something caught my eye. A small, scruffy dog was running across the grass, chasing after a bright red ball. The dog's joy was so pure, so uninhibited, that it made me smile. The way its tail wagged with excitement, the way it tumbled over itself in its hurry to get the ball, reminded me of the simple pleasures in life, the little things that could bring a smile to your face. A woman sitting nearby noticed me watching the dog. She smiled and said, "He's full of energy, isn't he? His name is Max. He's a handful, but he's also a little ball of sunshine." I smiled back at her. "He's adorable. He looks so happy." The woman's eyes softened as she looked at the dog. "He is. He's been through a lot, you know. I rescued him from the shelter a year ago. He had a rough start, but now, he's the happiest dog I know." Her words struck a chord in me. Max had been through hardships, but now he was full of life, full of joy. I thought about my own struggles, about the times I had felt lost, unsure if I would ever find my way again. But maybe, like Max, I could heal. Maybe I could find happiness again, even after everything I had been through. Sometimes I think he's teaching me how to live, the woman continued, her voice soft. He's not weighed down by the past. He just focuses on the present. Every day is a new chance for him, and he doesn't waste it. Her words lingered in my mind long after she and Max had left the park. Maybe that was it. Maybe I had been so focused on the past that I had forgotten to live in the present. I had been carrying around the weight of everything that had happened. Not allowing myself the freedom to simply be, I stood up from the bench, feeling a shift inside me. It was a small shift, but it was something. I felt the need to move, to take a step forward. So, I started walking again, this time with a sense of purpose. When I returned home, I didn't feel the same heaviness that had clouded my mind earlier. The walk had cleared my head, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things weren't as bad as they seemed. Maybe I didn't have to have all the answers right away. Maybe it was okay to take things one step at a time. That night, I sat down to write. For the first time in months, I picked up my journal and began to write about everything that had been going on in my life. The fears, the doubts, the confusion. But I also wrote about the small victories, the little moments of hope, like the walk in the park and the lesson from Max the dog. The more I wrote, the more I realized that even in the hardest times, there had been moments of light. As I finished writing, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but I was starting to understand that it was okay not to know. Life was about finding the beauty in the moments, no matter how small they seemed. It was about taking one step at a time, trusting that things would get better, even if it didn't happen overnight. The next day I woke up with a sense of possibility. Maybe the road ahead would be difficult, but I no longer felt like I was walking it alone. I had myself, and I had the support of the people who cared about me. And for the first time in a long time, I could see a glimmer of hope in the distance. The future didn't seem as scary anymore. It felt like it was waiting for me to take the next step, to embrace the unknown with courage and faith. The following week was a whirlwind of emotions. I had felt the glimmer of hope, but doubts crept in like unwelcome shadows, threatening to take away the little peace I had started to build. Still, I kept going, one foot in front of the other. I had learned that healing wasn't a straight path. It wasn't going to happen overnight, and I had to be okay with that. It was a Tuesday morning when I received a message from Sarah. She had texted me a simple, "How are you doing?" Those 4 words felt like a lifeline. I hadn't been able to reach out much lately, but I wanted to tell her everything, to let her know how much her words had meant to me. I took a deep breath and replied, "I think I'm starting to feel better. It's been tough, but I'm trying to take things one day at a time." Her response came quickly. "That's great to hear. You're stronger than you know. Just remember, you don't have to do it all alone." I smiled as I read her message. She was right. I didn't have to do it all alone. In fact, I wasn't alone at all. I had people who cared, who wanted me to get better. That thought gave me a sense of strength I hadn't realized I had been lacking. I spent the rest of the day doing something I hadn't done in a while, taking care of myself. I cooked a simple meal, went for a walk in the afternoon, and took the time to enjoy the quiet of my house. I didn't need anything extravagant to feel good. It was the small moments, the things I used to take for granted, that started to fill me with a sense of peace. As the days went on, I began to embrace the little victories. I was taking better care of my body. I was reaching out more to friends and family, allowing myself to be open about what I was going through. I still had bad days, but they didn't feel as heavy anymore. There were moments of lightness, moments when I felt like I could breathe a little easier. I had also started journaling again, not just about my struggles, but about the things that made me happy, the things I was grateful for. I wrote about the sunshine on my face during my morning walks, the laughter of friends, and the small acts of kindness that made me feel seen. Slowly, my journal transformed into a place not just of release, but of celebration. Celebrating the progress I had made, no matter how small it seemed. One night, I sat on my couch, flipping through the pages of my journal. As I read the words I had written, I realized how far I had come. There had been times when I thought I would never find my way out of the darkness, when I thought I was lost forever. But I had made it. One day at a time, I had found my way back to myself. I closed the journal and put it on the table, feeling a sense of accomplishment. I had faced my fears, my doubts, and my pain. I had faced the unknown, and while I still didn't have all the answers, I knew I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I was learning how to trust the process, how to let go of the need to control everything, and to simply take the next step. The next morning I went to the park again, this time with a sense of purpose. I wasn't just walking to clear my mind or to distract myself. I was walking because I wanted to. I wanted to be present, to enjoy the beauty of the world around me. As I strolled down the path, I saw the same scruffy dog, Max, chasing after his red ball. This time, I didn't just smile. I stopped and watched him run, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. A woman was sitting on the bench nearby, and I recognized her as the same one from a few weeks ago. She looked up and saw me standing there, watching Max. She smiled warmly and said, "I see you've returned. How have you been?" I sat down on the bench beside her. "I've been good, actually. I've been taking it one day at a time. Just focusing on the small things." She nodded knowingly. "That's all we can do, isn't it? Just one step at a time." I smiled, grateful for her wisdom. She had been right all along. The key wasn't rushing to the end of the journey. It was allowing yourself to move through it at your own pace, with patience and compassion. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with where I was. I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to have everything figured out. Life wasn't about the destination. It was about the journey. And as long as I kept moving forward, even if it was just a small step each day, I would get there. As I left the park that day, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Grateful for the lessons I had learned, for the strength I had found within myself, and for the people who had walked alongside me, whether they knew it or not. I still had a long way to go, but now I understood something important. Healing wasn't about reaching a point where everything was fixed. It was about finding the strength to keep going, even when the road was tough, and trusting that every step forward, no matter how small, was worth it. As the days turned into weeks, I began to feel a shift inside me. It wasn't sudden, and it wasn't perfect, but I could feel it. A quiet strength that had been hiding inside me all along was beginning to emerge. Each morning when I woke up, I felt a little lighter, a little more hopeful. The days were still difficult at times, but now I understood that it was okay to have both good and bad days. It didn't mean I wasn't making progress. It meant I was human. I started doing things I hadn't done in a long time. Little things, like reading a book I had put down months ago, or baking cookies on a rainy afternoon. There was something about these small, simple acts that brought a sense of peace into my life. They helped me reconnect with myself, with who I was before everything felt so overwhelming. It was a Saturday afternoon when I decided to take a walk in a different part of the city. I had been to the park so many times that it felt almost like a routine, and I wanted to break the cycle. As I walked through the unfamiliar streets, I noticed how quiet the city felt. The world around me seemed to slow down, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I could breathe deeply without the weight of everything pressing on my chest. I passed a small cafe, and the smell of fresh coffee and pastries made my stomach rumble. Without thinking, I went inside. The warmth of the cafe enveloped me as I took a seat by the window. I ordered a cappuccino and a chocolate croissant, something I hadn't allowed myself to indulge in for a long time. As I sat there, sipping my coffee and watching the world go by, I realized something important. I was learning how to enjoy the present moment. For so long, I had been focused on the past and the future, constantly worrying about what had happened and what was yet to come. But in that moment, I was simply here. I was present, and that was enough. I had come to understand that healing wasn't just about moving on from the past. It was about learning to embrace the present. It was about finding joy in the small moments, even when they felt insignificant. And it was about giving myself permission to feel everything, both the good and the bad, without judgment. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in a long time. It wasn't because everything in my life was perfect. It wasn't. But I had learned something vital, that I could find peace in the midst of chaos. I could still feel joy even when things were hard. I could still move forward even when the path wasn't clear. I was no longer waiting for a moment when everything would be fixed. I was learning to live with the uncertainty, to trust that I would get through whatever came next. I knew now that I didn't need all the answers right away. I didn't need to rush. I could take my time, one step at a time. When I got home, I sat down at my desk and opened my journal. I hadn't written in it for a few days, but today felt like the right moment. I picked up my pen and started to write. I'm not perfect, and that's okay. I'm doing the best I can. Every day is a new opportunity, and I'm grateful for the chance to keep moving forward. Some days will be harder than others, but I will continue. I will keep going, one step at a time. I closed the journal and took a deep breath. The words felt true. For so long, I had been trying to fix everything all at once, but now I understood that it wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. It was about the courage to keep going, even when the road seemed uncertain. Later that evening, I got a text from Sarah. It was simple, just a few words. How's your day been? I smiled as I typed my reply. It's been good. I feel like I'm starting to understand things better now. Her response came almost immediately. I'm proud of you. You've come so far. Keep going. You've got this. It was a small message, but it meant the world to me. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in this journey. I had people who supported me, who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. The next morning, I woke up early, ready to face another day. I had learned that the key to healing was not in waiting for everything to be perfect, but in finding strength in the moments of imperfection. I was learning how to live with my feelings, how to sit with them without letting them control me, and most importantly, I was learning to trust myself again. The road ahead was still unknown, and there would be times when I stumbled or felt lost, but I knew now that I could find my way. I could keep going, no matter what. Because the truth was, I had already come so far, and with each step I took, I was becoming stronger. I was becoming more of the person I wanted to be, and that person was enough. I had made it this far, but there were still days when the weight of everything felt heavy. Some mornings, it felt like the progress I had made was slipping through my fingers, like sand on a windy beach. But I didn't give up. I kept reminding myself that healing wasn't a straight line. It had its ups and downs, its twists and turns. And each time I stumbled, I would rise again. One day, As I sat in the quiet of my apartment, I reflected on how far I had come. I could see the changes within me, even if they weren't obvious to anyone else. The way I handled my emotions, the way I began to trust people again, especially myself. These were the things that mattered most. The world around me might not have changed in big, dramatic ways, but I had, and that was enough. But there was still one last thing I had to face: letting go. Letting go was always the hardest part for me. Letting go of past hurts, of the pain I had carried for so long. It wasn't easy to forgive myself, to forgive others, but I had learned that holding on to the past was only keeping me stuck in a place I no longer wanted to be. I had learned to accept that not everything would make sense. Not every question would be answered. And not every part of the story would have a perfect ending. Some things I had to let go of. Some things I had to release, so I could make space for new beginnings. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that letting go wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about pretending the past never happened. It was about freeing myself from its hold, so I could move forward with a lighter heart. It was about accepting that the things I couldn't change no longer had the power to control me. That afternoon, I went to the park where I had spent so many hours lost in my thoughts. It had always been a place of comfort, a place where I could think and process everything that was going on inside me. But today it felt different. The air was warmer, and the sun shone a little brighter. I walked to the bench by the lake, the one where I had sat many times before. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of the birds and the rustling leaves. I breathed deeply, feeling the peaceful energy of the park surround me. And then I let go. I let go of the guilt I had been carrying, the weight of things I had done wrong, the times I had hurt others or myself. I let go of the anger I had felt, the moments when I had been betrayed or misunderstood. I let go of the fear that had held me back for so long, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of failing, the fear of facing the unknown. As I opened my eyes, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't a magical moment, but it was enough. I wasn't burdened by the past anymore. I could feel it slipping away, and with each breath, I felt lighter, freer. It wasn't perfect, and I knew there would be moments when the past would try to creep back in. But for now, I had done it. I had taken the final step in my healing journey. I had found the strength to let go. I stood up from the bench, feeling the sun on my face. The world around me seemed brighter now, more full of possibilities. I had learned so much over the past few months, about myself, about others, about what it meant to heal. And while the journey was far from over, I now felt like I was ready for whatever came next. As I walked back home, I realized that the final piece of the puzzle wasn't about finding answers. It was about embracing the unknown. It was about accepting that life would always be filled with challenges, but that I had the strength to face them. It was about knowing that I didn't need to have everything figured out. I just needed to keep moving forward. And so, I did. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was no longer afraid of what it might hold. I had learned that the most important thing was to keep going, even when things seemed uncertain. And with each step, I was creating a new story. One where I was in control. One where I could heal. One where I could finally feel at peace. When I walked into my apartment that evening, I smiled. The world was still imperfect, but I had found something precious, the strength to keep going, and that was all I needed. It had been a few weeks since I had let go of the past. Some days were easier than others, but there was one thing I had learned. Healing was a process. It did not happen overnight, and there was no set timeline. But the more I worked on myself, the more I realized that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. The first few days of this new chapter felt strange. It was like I had woken up in a world that was both familiar and foreign. The routines that once felt comforting now felt like they were part of a past life, a version of me that no longer existed. But as I moved through the days, I started to see the changes more clearly. I had a newfound sense of independence, a quiet confidence that I had never truly recognized before. I began small, taking one step at a time. I started to care for myself in ways I had neglected for so long. I cooked meals that nourished both my body and soul. I went for walks in the park, enjoying the fresh air and the quiet moments of reflection. I began to read again, something I had always loved but had forgotten in the midst of my emotional turmoil. The more I took care of myself, the more I realized that I had been neglecting my own needs for far too long. I had always been so focused on others, on trying to make everyone happy, on giving my love to others without asking for anything in return, that I had forgotten to love myself. But now, I was learning how to do that. It felt strange at first, but it was also freeing. I didn't have to seek approval or validation from anyone. I didn't need anyone's permission to take care of my own heart. As I started to focus more on myself, I noticed the people around me began to notice the change as well. My friends and family could see it. They could see the shift in my energy, the way I carried myself. They started to compliment me more, to encourage me. It felt good to hear those words, but it felt even better to know that I was doing this for me, not for anyone else. One day I received a message from my old friend, Mia. We had been close for years, but after everything that had happened, we had lost touch. I was hesitant to open the message at first, not knowing what to expect. But when I read it, I felt a warmth in my heart. She had written, "I have missed you. I hope we can talk soon." I smiled softly to myself. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a new chapter with her. One where we could rebuild the friendship we had lost. I took a deep breath before I typed my reply. I would like that too. It was small, but it was a step toward reconnecting, toward rebuilding what had been broken. And in that moment, I realized that this was the essence of healing. Taking small steps forward, not knowing exactly where they would lead, but trusting that they would get me to a better place. The days continued to pass, and each one felt more like a gift than the last. I began to take better care of my body, getting enough sleep and drinking more water. I joined a yoga class to help me find inner peace and balance. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. But there was still something else I needed to do, something I had been avoiding, something that had haunted me for months. I needed to forgive myself. I sat down one evening, alone in my room, and began to write in my journal. I wrote about the mistakes I had made, the times I had hurt others, the ways I had let fear control me. And then, I wrote the most important words I had ever written. I forgive you. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace within myself. It wasn't about forgetting or pretending that everything was okay. It was about accepting my flaws, my mistakes, and understanding that I was human. I had learned. I had grown, and I was ready to move forward. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I was not the same person I had been when I started this journey. I had changed. And though I still had moments of doubt and fear, I now knew that I was strong enough to face whatever came my way. I smiled to myself as I looked in the mirror. This was not the end of my story. This was the beginning of something beautiful, something new. It had been several months since I had let go. The days were getting easier, and my heart was slowly healing. I felt stronger now, more aware of my worth and the power I had to create the life I wanted. I had built a new routine, one that was focused on me and my well-being. I was finally learning to enjoy the simple pleasures in life. Waking up to a peaceful morning, savoring a cup of tea, or walking along the beach, feeling the sand between my toes. I had also made new friends, people who saw me for who I truly was and supported me in ways I had never expected. These new relationships were different from the ones I had before. They were built on mutual respect and understanding. I felt a sense of belonging that I had never experienced in the past. But just when I thought everything was moving forward, he came back. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I received the message. At first, I did not recognize the number, but something about it felt familiar. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, unsure of what to expect. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words. I know I hurt you. I am sorry. Can we talk? My stomach twisted in knots. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was reading. It had been so long since I had heard from him, and now, out of nowhere, he was asking to talk. The person who had broken my heart, the one who had betrayed me, was suddenly back in my life. For a long time, I stared at the screen, unsure of what to do. My emotions were all over the place. There was a part of me that wanted to reply immediately, to tell him how much he had hurt me, to let him know how deeply his actions had affected me. But there was another part of me, a quieter part, that felt something I could not quite explain. Confusion maybe, or maybe hope. I had spent so much time healing, building my life back up, that I did not want anything to tear it down again. I had worked too hard to get to where I was. I had found peace in my own company, in the friendships I had made, and in the way I had learned to love myself. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the silence fill the room. The decision weighed heavily on me. Should I respond? Should I allow him back into my life? Or should I leave things as they were? I decided to wait. I would not rush into a decision. Not this time. I needed to think this through, to give myself the space to make the choice that was right for me. The next few days were filled with a sense of quiet tension. I found myself thinking about the message often, turning it over in my mind like a puzzle I could not solve. I remembered the hurt, the lies, the way he had made me feel small and unimportant. I remembered how I had felt so lost and broken, how I had struggled to pick up the pieces of my life after everything had fallen apart. But I also remembered the good times we had shared, the laughter, the moments of tenderness, the way he had once made me feel special. The conflicting emotions tangled together, leaving me unsure of what to believe. I knew one thing for sure, though. I had changed. I was not the same person I had been when we first met. I had grown. I had learned to stand on my own 2 feet, to rely on myself, and I could not go back to a version of myself that was dependent on someone else for my happiness. When I finally replied to his message, I took my time. I did not rush. I did not allow the past to dictate my response. I simply wrote, "I need time to think about this. I cannot just go back to how things were." I hit send, and the weight of the decision seemed to lift, if only for a moment. I knew I had made the right choice. I had set a boundary, something I had never done before. And for the first time, I felt a sense of control over my own life. Over the next few days, he continued to send messages, asking for a chance to explain, to make things right. But I remained firm. I did not respond to his pleas. I was no longer the girl who had been desperate for his approval, who had longed for his love. I was someone new. Someone who valued herself enough to not settle for anything less than what she deserved. And as the days passed, I began to feel a quiet sense of relief. The pain of the past no longer had a hold on me. I was free to live my life on my own terms, without fear of being pulled back into the toxic patterns of the past. I had made the choice to move forward, to embrace the future with open arms. And that, I realized, was the most important decision I could have made. It had been a few weeks since I last heard from him. The silence was strange at first, but it had become a comfort, a reminder of how far I had come. I no longer felt the urge to check my phone every few minutes, waiting for a message from him. I no longer felt the pain that used to follow me everywhere I went. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of peace. It was as though I had closed a chapter in my life and turned the page to something new, something better. I did not know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. The girl who had once been unsure of herself, who had questioned her worth, was no longer there. In her place was someone stronger, more confident and more self-aware. I had learned to stand on my own, to trust myself and my own instincts. I had learned that I was enough, just as I was. I no longer needed someone else to validate me. I could feel the change in my thoughts, in the way I carried myself. I had stopped doubting my decisions. I had stopped wondering if I was making the right choices. The fear that had once held me back had started to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. I knew that I could handle whatever came my way. I spent more time with the people who truly cared about me, the ones who saw me for who I was and accepted me, flaws and all. They helped me see the value in myself that I had once overlooked. Their kindness and support had become the foundation I built my life upon, and as I spent more time with them, I began to notice something else. I was no longer afraid of being alone. In fact, I had come to enjoy my own company. I had learned to fill the spaces in my life with things that brought me joy. Reading, painting, going for walks, or simply sitting in silence. I had become my own best friend. I remember one evening, I was sitting by the window, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the world felt still. I felt at peace in a way I had never felt before. There was no noise, no distractions, just me and my thoughts. It was a moment of clarity, a reminder that I had everything I needed right here, inside of me. I was different now. I had grown. The girl who had once been afraid to speak up, afraid to set boundaries, was now someone who could express herself with strength and conviction. I had learned to say no when I needed to protect my own peace. I had learned that my feelings mattered, and that it was okay to put myself first. But the most important change was within my heart. I had stopped searching for someone else to complete me. I had realized that I was already whole. I no longer needed someone to tell me I was worthy. I knew it for myself. And that realization, that quiet knowing, gave me a sense of freedom I had never experienced before. I was no longer tied to the past, to the mistakes, to the hurt. I was free to be who I was, without fear or shame. I was free to build a future that was all my own. The future felt full of possibilities now, not because I had someone to share it with, but because I had myself. I was no longer waiting for someone to save me. I was saving myself, one small step at a time. It had been a long journey, but I finally felt strong enough to make a decision that I had been avoiding for far too long. For months, I had been torn between holding on to what I had once believed was love and letting go to embrace the future. But now, in this moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had spent so much time giving, so much time trying to fix things, trying to make them work. I had tried to be everything for him, to give him everything I had. But in the process, I had lost myself. I had forgotten who I was, what I wanted, and what I deserved. I had allowed myself to believe that I needed someone else to feel whole, that my happiness depended on someone else's love. But now, I knew that was not true. I did not need anyone to make me feel complete. I was already whole, and so I made the decision. I was not going to wait for him any longer. I was not going to keep hoping that things would change. I was not going to live in a world of maybe and what if. I was going to choose myself. Choosing myself meant accepting that I deserved better. It meant acknowledging that I had a right to happiness, peace, and love. Not from anyone else, but from within myself. I had learned that self-love was not selfish. It was necessary. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, looking at the girl who had been through so much. I saw the pain in her eyes, but I also saw the strength. I saw the scars, but I also saw the healing. And I knew, deep down, that she had come so far. I had learned to be gentle with myself. I had learned that it was okay to make mistakes, to stumble, and to fall. What mattered was getting back up. What mattered was how I treated myself after the fall. And I had learned to treat myself with kindness, with compassion, and with respect. Choosing myself meant letting go of the past. It meant acknowledging the hurt, but not allowing it to control me. It meant forgiving myself for staying too long, for allowing things to happen that I should have stopped. But most of all, it meant giving myself permission to heal, to move forward, and to be free. It was not an easy decision. There were moments when doubt crept in. There were moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But deep down, I knew it was the only choice I could make. It was the choice I needed to make. I realized that love, real love, was not supposed to hurt. It was not supposed to make me feel small or unimportant, or as though I had to prove my worth. Real love was supposed to lift me up, to help me grow, and to make me feel seen and valued, and I was done settling for anything less than that. I chose myself because I knew I deserved more. I deserved someone who would love me the way I loved myself, unconditionally, without hesitation, and with all their heart. I deserved someone who would see me as their equal, not someone to fix, not someone to save, but someone to walk beside. I chose myself because I realized that I was enough, just as I was. I did not need to change for anyone. I did not need to hide my true self. I could be unapologetically me, and that was enough. The decision was final. I was no longer waiting for him to come back, to apologize, or to make things right. I was moving forward, with or without him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The first light of morning filtered through my window, soft and gentle, casting a golden glow over everything. It was the kind of light that made the world feel new again. Everything seemed still and peaceful, as if the earth itself was taking a deep breath after a long, hard night. I woke up that morning with a sense of calm I had not felt in a long time. It was a quiet kind of peace, not the kind that comes with loud declarations or grand gestures, but the kind that settles deep inside you. It was the kind of peace that comes when you stop fighting with yourself, when you stop trying to force things to be different and just let them be. I had spent so many months feeling lost, feeling like I was drifting through life without purpose, without direction. But now, I could feel that things were changing. Slowly, surely, things were starting to fall into place. The pain of the past still lingered in my heart, but it no longer held the same power over me. It was no longer the weight that defined me. I had carried it for so long. But now I was learning to set it down, little by little, piece by piece. I had spent too long being afraid of what the future might bring. I had spent too long thinking that the past defined me, that it controlled who I was and who I would become. But now, I saw it differently. I saw the future as a blank page, full of possibilities. I saw it as a chance to start over, to create something new. As I sat in my kitchen that morning, sipping my coffee, I thought about the days ahead. I thought about the new habits I had started to form, the small changes I had made in my life. They might have seemed insignificant to someone else, but to me they were everything. They were the building blocks of something better, something brighter. I had started taking walks again, just to clear my head. I had started reading more, losing myself in stories that made me feel alive again. I had reconnected with friends who reminded me of who I was before all of the pain. They helped me remember that I was not just someone who had been hurt, but someone who had dreams, someone who had a future. I was starting to feel like myself again. It was not a dramatic transformation, not a sudden change. It was more like a gentle unfolding, like a flower slowly blooming. But it was enough. It was all I needed. I smiled to myself as I thought about how far I had come. Just a few months ago, I had felt like I was drowning, like I could never get out of the darkness. But now, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. It was not a bright, blinding light, but a soft, steady glow that promised things would get better, that there was hope. I knew the road ahead would not always be easy. I knew there would be moments of doubt, moments when I would question whether I was doing the right thing, but I also knew that I had come too far to turn back now. I had chosen myself, and that choice had given me the strength to move forward. As the day went on, I felt a new energy in my steps. I walked with purpose, not because I had all the answers, but because I had made the decision to keep moving forward, no matter what. I did not have to know everything. I just had to trust that things would unfold the way they were meant to. The world felt different now. The colors seemed brighter. The air felt fresher. And I felt more alive than I had in a long time. It was not about finding someone else to make me happy. It was about finding peace within myself, about realizing that I could be enough on my own. And so, I took one step at a time, knowing that the future was uncertain, but trusting that it would be okay. I was no longer waiting for the world to change. I was changing it myself, with every small decision, with every moment of self-care, with every act of kindness to myself. Today was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it. It was a quiet evening when I found myself sitting by the window again, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, a soft reminder that everything in life is temporary, that even the most beautiful moments fade. But there was something about this evening that felt different. I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for something specific, but for everything that had brought me to this moment. I had spent so much time focusing on what I had lost, on the pain I had carried with me for so long. But now, as I looked back, I realized something important. The journey had shaped me. The heartbreak, the confusion, the loneliness, they had all played a part in making me who I was today. It was not that I was thankful for the pain itself, but I was thankful for the lessons it had taught me. I had learned so much about myself. I had learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive even the most difficult moments. I had learned that I did not need anyone else to complete me, that I could be whole on my own. I thought about the people who had come and gone from my life, the ones who had hurt me, and the ones who had helped me heal. Each of them had left an imprint on me, whether they knew it or not. I had learned from them all, even from those who had caused me the most pain. There were moments when I felt angry, when I felt betrayed, and I still struggled with the scars they left behind. But I no longer held on to that anger. I had let it go, piece by piece, and in its place, I had found peace. Peace not because everything had turned out the way I wanted it to, but because I had found a way to accept what had happened and move forward. I thought about the friends who had stood by me, the ones who had listened without judgment, the ones who had offered comfort when I needed it the most. They had given me the strength to keep going, even when I felt like giving up. They had reminded me that I was not alone, that I had a support system, even when it felt like the world was against me. In the stillness of that evening, I realized that I had not just survived. I had grown. I had learned to love myself again, to trust myself again. I had learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made and to accept that I was not perfect. I had learned that healing was not a straight path, but a winding road, and sometimes the most important thing was to keep moving forward, no matter how slowly. I had been so focused on the future, on what was yet to come, that I had forgotten to appreciate how far I had come. I had been so caught up in trying to fix everything that I had not taken the time to look at the person I had become. She was stronger, kinder, more patient with herself. She was still healing, still growing, but she was not the same person she had been a year ago. And that, I realized, was something worth celebrating. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the cool evening air on my face. I did not have all the answers, and I still had a long way to go. But I was not afraid anymore. I was not afraid to be myself, to embrace my journey, no matter where it took me. And so, I said thank you. Thank you to the past, for the lessons it had taught me. Thank you to the people who had hurt me, for making me stronger. Thank you to the friends who had held me up when I could not stand on my own. And most of all, thank you to myself, for never giving up, for finding the courage to keep going even when it seemed impossible. I had been through a lot, and yet here I was, still standing. It was not perfect, and I was not perfect, but that was okay. I had learned to appreciate the beauty in the imperfections, in the quiet moments of growth, in the slow, steady progress. So, I took a deep breath and let go of the last of my regrets. I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because I had made it this far. And that, in itself, was something worth thanking. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with clouds. It was a peaceful kind of gray, the kind that invited reflection rather than despair. I found myself walking through the quiet streets, my thoughts moving in slow waves, like the ripples on a calm lake. I was not sure what I was looking for, but I knew I was looking for something important. It had been months since everything had fallen apart, and yet it felt as though time had stood still in certain parts of my heart. I had spent so much time being angry at him, at them, at the world. I had spent so much time feeling hurt, feeling betrayed, and most of all, feeling lost. But today, something felt different. Today, I had the urge to stop running from those feelings. Today, I wanted to face them, to understand them, and finally, to let them go. I had carried so much guilt for so long. Guilt for things I had done, things I had failed to do, and things I could never change. I had blamed myself for every mistake, every broken promise, every word that had been left unsaid. I had told myself that if I had just been better, if I had just tried harder, things would have turned out differently. But now, I knew that was not true. The truth was, I was human. I was flawed, just like everyone else. I had made mistakes, but those mistakes did not define me. They were part of my story, part of the journey that had brought me here. And just like the rain had stopped falling, it was time for me to stop carrying the weight of my past. I sat on a bench in the park, letting the stillness surround me. The world was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could hear my own thoughts clearly. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs. It felt good to breathe, to just be present, without the constant pressure of regret pushing against my chest. I am not perfect, I whispered to myself. The words felt strange at first, as though they did not belong to me. But the more I said them, the more I realized how true they were. I had spent so long trying to be perfect, trying to please everyone around me, trying to fix things that were never meant to be fixed. But now I could see that perfection was not the answer. It was not about being flawless. It was about being real, about accepting who I was, faults and all. I thought about all the times I had blamed myself for things that were beyond my control. I had blamed myself for the choices others had made, for the way people had treated me, for the things I could not change. But now, I could see that it was not my fault. It was not my responsibility to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had to forgive myself. I had to let go of the shame. the guilt, and the regret. I had to stop punishing myself for things that had happened in the past. I had to release the idea that I could have somehow made everything turn out differently. The past was gone, and all I had was the present. All I could do was move forward, and I needed to do that without the burden of self-blame. So, I forgave myself. I forgave myself for the times I had been too harsh, too afraid, too unsure of myself. I forgave myself for the moments when I had let fear control my decisions, when I had chosen to protect myself instead of opening up to others. I forgave myself for the times I had believed I was not enough, when I had allowed the opinions of others to define my worth. It was not easy. Forgiveness never is. But it was necessary. It was necessary for my peace, for my healing, and for my future. I had to learn that I was worthy of love, even from myself. I had to learn that it was okay to make mistakes, as long as I learned from them and grew. I had to learn that I was enough, just as I was, without needing to be perfect. As I sat there, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It was as though the storm inside me had finally passed, and I could breathe freely once more. I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because I had taken the first step towards healing. I had made the choice to forgive myself, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future with open arms. I forgive you, I said softly, not just to the world, but to myself. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The wind was gentle that day, brushing against my skin as I stepped outside. I had not realized how much I had been holding in until I felt the air around me. It felt like the world was welcoming me back, like I had been away for too long, and now it was time for me to return to myself. I stood at the edge of the park, looking at the wide open space ahead of me. The trees were swaying softly, their leaves dancing in the breeze, and for the first time in so long, I did not feel burdened. There was no heaviness in my chest, no weight pulling me down. It was just the calm, peaceful feeling of freedom. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool air, letting it fill my lungs. It felt like a fresh start, a new beginning, like I was standing at the edge of a new chapter in my life. The pain, the guilt, the regret, they were all fading away, becoming a distant memory, like the storm clouds that had passed through the sky. For so long, I had been trapped in my own fears and doubts. I had been holding on to the past, carrying the weight of every mistake, every failure, every moment that had hurt me. But now, I could see that all of that had been holding me back. I had been the one keeping myself in chains. It was me who had been afraid to let go, afraid to trust again, afraid to believe in myself. But not anymore. I took a step forward, and then another, and soon I was walking with purpose, not out of fear, but because I knew I could. I had learned so much on this journey. I had learned that I was not defined by my past, that I was not my mistakes. I had learned that healing was not a straight path, but a winding road, one that I had to walk with patience and self-compassion. I had learned that I was worthy of happiness, that I deserved peace, and that I could build a future that was all my own. I reached the open field and paused for a moment. I looked up at the sky, feeling the sun's warmth on my face. It was as though everything was in its place, as though the world was waiting for me to take this step. I was no longer trapped by the past. I was no longer bound by the pain. I was free. The freedom did not come suddenly. nor did it come without effort. It had been a slow process, a series of small steps, each one bringing me closer to this moment. But now I could feel the truth of it deep inside me. I was free. I had forgiven myself. I had let go of the guilt and the shame. I had stopped blaming myself for things I could not change. I had learned to love myself, not in spite of my flaws, but because of them. I had learned to embrace my imperfections, to accept myself as I was, and to trust that I was enough. It felt like the chains had finally fallen away, and I could breathe freely again. For the first time in a long time, I felt light, as though the world had opened up to me, offering me all the possibilities that life had to give. I could feel the wind in my hair, the warmth of the sun on my skin, and I knew that this was the beginning of something new. I was no longer the girl I had been before, the one filled with fear, regret, and self-doubt. I was a new version of myself, one who had learned to rise above the pain, to find strength in vulnerability, and to embrace the freedom that came with letting go. I smiled to myself, not because everything was perfect, but because I knew that I had made it through. I had come out on the other side of all the pain, all the heartbreak, and all the uncertainty. And now, I was free to move forward, free to live my life on my own terms, free to become the person I was always meant to be. As I walked away from the park, I felt lighter with every step. The world seemed brighter, the air clearer, and I knew that I was no longer held back by the past. I was free to be myself, free to live the life I had always dreamed of. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. It was a quiet morning when it finally hit me, the truth of it all. I was no longer the person I had once been, the person filled with doubt and uncertainty. I was no longer the girl who allowed the past to define her, who let other people's opinions shape her sense of self. No, today I knew exactly who I was. The journey had been long, full of twists and turns, moments of fear, pain, and growth. But now, when I looked in the mirror, I did not see the same girl I had seen months ago. I saw someone different, someone stronger, someone who had faced the storms and come out the other side with a heart still full of love, still capable of hope. It had taken time for me to get here, to truly understand who I was. For so long, I had been caught in the cycle of trying to please others, trying to fit into the mold that society had set for me. I had let their words and actions weigh me down, shaping my sense of self-worth, my confidence. But no more. I had learned that I could be my own person. I did not need to follow anyone else's path. I did not need to seek approval from others to feel good about myself. I could create my own path, choose my own destiny, and trust that I was enough just as I was. The journey had taught me so much. I had learned to listen to my own voice, to trust my instincts, and to make decisions based on what felt right for me, not what others expected of me. I had learned to love myself, to accept the flaws and imperfections that made me who I was. I had learned that being authentic was more important than being perfect. And now, I stood tall, fully aware of my worth, fully confident in who I had become. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. I was me. And that was enough, I thought, back to all the times I had felt lost, to all the moments when I had questioned my value, when I had let others' opinions weigh on me. It seemed like a different life now, a distant memory of someone I did not even recognize anymore. I had changed. I had grown. I had found strength in places I did not know existed. I was proud of who I had become. I had faced my fears and walked through the hardest moments of my life. I had survived the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the pain, and I had come out the other side, not broken, but stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live life on my own terms. I could feel the power within me, the quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who I was. I was not defined by the mistakes of the past, nor by the expectations of others. I was defined by my own choices, my own strength, and my own heart. It was a strange feeling, this peace within me. It was not loud or boastful. It was calm, steady, and unshakable. I no longer needed to prove myself to anyone. I had nothing to prove. I was enough. And for the first time in my life, I truly understood that. As I walked through the day, I could feel the difference. The way I held my head high, the way I moved with purpose, the way I interacted with others. It was all different. It was not about seeking validation or approval. It was simply about being myself, about embracing who I had become. And that was enough. There was no fear anymore, no anxiety about what others thought of me. I knew that I was worthy of love, of happiness, and of success. I knew that I could face whatever life threw my way, because I had already faced so much and come out stronger each time. As I looked ahead to the future, I did not see uncertainty or fear. I saw possibility. I saw a life filled with hope, with new opportunities, and with the strength to overcome anything. I was no longer afraid of the unknown. I knew that I could handle whatever came my way, because I knew who I was. And for the first time, I felt free. Free from the need to prove myself. Free from the past. Free to be the person I had always wanted to be. If I could speak directly to you, the one who is listening to my story, I would say this: you are not alone. I know you may be struggling, feeling lost, or unsure of where your journey is headed. I know the pain of betrayal, the ache of loneliness, and the fear that grips your heart when you feel like you are not enough. I have been there too. I know what it feels like to be broken, to feel like the pieces of your life do not fit together anymore. But let me tell you something that took me a long time to learn. You are stronger than you think. There were times when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I would ever be okay again. I wondered if the pain would ever stop, if I would ever feel whole. And for a long time, I thought I could never heal from the wounds I had suffered. But here I am, standing, tall, with a heart that is no longer weighed down by the past. It is possible to heal. It is possible to find peace, even after the worst of storms. You may feel like you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, like you are walking through life alone. But I want you to know that you do not have to carry that weight by yourself. There is strength within you. Maybe it is hidden deep down, but it is there. And with time, with patience, and with love, you will uncover it. I know it is hard. I know the path feels long and uncertain, but do not give up. Do not let the darkness consume you. There is light ahead. There is hope, even when it feels far away. You will not always be where you are now. The pain you feel, the confusion, the doubt, it will not last forever. You will grow. You will learn. You will heal. And one day, you will look back and realize how far you have come. I know this because I have walked that path. I have felt the emptiness. I have felt the heartbreak. But I have also felt the strength that comes with overcoming it. I have discovered that the most powerful thing you can do is choose yourself. Choose to love yourself, to heal, and to grow. It is not always easy, but it is worth it. The journey may not always be smooth, and there will be moments when you stumble. But remember, it is not about being perfect. It is about moving forward, no matter how small the steps may be. Every step counts. Every moment of courage matters. As you move forward, I want you to remember something important. You are worthy of love, happiness, and peace. Do not let anyone or anything convince you otherwise. You are enough, just as you are. Your worth is not defined by your mistakes, your past, or the opinions of others. It is defined by who you are at your core. So, take a deep breath. Let go of the past. Trust that the future holds something better for you. You do not have to carry the burden of fear, doubt, or regret. You can create a new story for yourself, one that is filled with hope, strength, and possibility. And as you walk this path, know that you are not alone. I am with you, and together we will make it through.